Hello and welcome back to this third video in the game development series. Again, if you find this video useful or helpful, please support the website by going to www.medicnose.com and clicking on the PayPal icon on the right here. In this video we're going to be taking the code we had last time and start adding in the components for the game engine that works with OpenGL. Okay, so let's get right into it. Let's open up our WinMain here and take a look at what we have. Currently we just open up a mutex and we set up a variable for the return value and we created our error handler. Well, next thing we're going to be doing is setting up certain parameters that we want the game engine to run in. So things like, do we want full screen, what resolution, how many colors, how many bits per color do we want to use? All those things we need to set up. And to set them up really easily, what I've done is I've created one structure to hold all these parameters. Now, I'm going to create the structure in a file called core, and in there I'm going to be storing all the core elements that the game engine will be using. So as we need extra things, I'm going to be putting it into this one file. So to do that, let's go into the Solution Explorer and create a directory here called core, and a header file directory as well called core as well. And we'll have to go back into Windows Explorer and add a directory here as well called core. Alright, now we can add the core.cpp and the core.h files. So again, we just right click, go add, new item, select CPP, type core, and specify that new path. Click OK. And again, we'll just move this over and repeat that for the header file as well. And put it in the core directory. Okay, so now we have those core files. Before I forget, let's go into our settings here and specify to include the core path as well. So under C++, under here, additional include directories, we have to include that core. So /core, click OK, and OK. Okay, so that should set everything up for the core. Let's put the core.cpp in first since it's easy. Once again, we want to include the precompiled header files at the top, and we're going to be including the core.h in here as well. So we'll save that and we can close that. And now let's take a look at the core.h. And again, standard sort of format with the if not defined, define it at the top and then end if at the bottom. So we only include this file once in our program. And I've broken it up into a couple sections here. Now, to make life easier on us, instead of having to include error handler in all of our code and core.h in all of our code, what I'm going to do is I'm going to include the error handler in here, so then we only have to include the core, and I'll automatically include the error handler as well. So we can do that just by including the error handler.h like that. Under the macro section, I'm going to add a macro here, which is going to be helpful. Now, what the macro does, I've called it safe delete, is we're going to pass to safe delete some parameter, and if that parameter exists, then we're going to delete it and set it to null. So it's going to be used for all our pointers. Whenever we create any kind of pointers using the new operator, well, at the end, when we're done using the pointer, we're going to call safe delete, and it's going to delete the pointer and set the pointer value to null. The other thing we're going to add in here is this structure which I've been telling you about called Windows parameters. Now, the structure itself contains a pointer to a title string, the width and the height parameters, a refresh rate, a parameter here that's a true or false for windowed, meaning is this going to be a window application or is it going to be a full screen application? And then a parameter here for Boolean 32-bit, meaning are we using 32-bit color? If this is true, we are. If it's false, then we're going to be using 16-bit colors. We also have a handle to our window, a handle to our DC, and a handle to our instance. And you'll see in a minute how we use these. Now, the constructor for the Windows parameters, we pass to it our title string as well as the handle to our instance. And you can see here that the title parameter that we pass in gets allocated to our pointer on the inside, and we default some values here for the width, height, and refresh rate. We specify we are going to be using by default a window, and 32-bit color is going to be turned off, so we're going to be using 16-bit if you don't specify anything. And then these pointers here, we're just going to initialize them to whatever we pass in as well as null. Now, let's take a look how we use this in our actual main code. So go back here. Okay, as you can see, what we do is we create a Windows parameter called WND_param, and we pass to the constructor the game name as well as the instance. Now, the game name was defined at the top here, and the instance happened to be one of the parameters that gets passed into WinMain. So we just pass those into the constructor, and then we're going to set the width of the window to be 800 by 600. That's the width and the height. Refresh rate we're going to set to 60 Hertz, and we're going to override the default parameter so that we are using 32-bit color. So we set it to true, and we are going to specify to be using windowed here as well. So that's how we're going to set up each time we want to create a window. These are all the parameters we need to set it up. Now I'm going to step ahead here a little bit, and I'm going to show you how we're going to use the game OpenGL class once we create it. That's what we're going to be creating next. So we're going to create an instance of it called myGame, and to the constructor we're going to pass a pointer to the air handler, and that was defined up here. And then after we create it using the constructor, we then call the create function within our game OpenGL, and we pass to it the Windows parameters that we set up here. So we pass a pointer to those, and if this returns true, then that means everything is okay, so we can actually start our game. And the start of the game basically is called within the start message loop. So the program is going to be stuck in this one function call here until the user quits the game. When the user quits, then the program basically comes out here and then quits. However, if create here failed, then we're going to display an error message to the screen, and then we set our return value to -1, and then we quit the program. So that's basically the whole main function we're going to be using for our code, and all the magic is going to be happening now within this game OpenGL class. So we have to create this guy, and everything that the game does has to be done inside this class. Okay, well, let's take a look now at this game OpenGL class. Again, I'm going to create a new directory under our headers and our source, just so we can categorize things a little bit easier. And we're going to add game OpenGL. And we'll go back into here and add it here as well. Okay, and now we need to add blank files. GL. Okay. And the other thing we need to do is project settings and include that path here as well. Alright, so everything's set up now. Well, let's begin with the .h file, and I'll show you what is contained in the game OpenGL class. At the top here we have an include to core.h, which also includes our error handler, and our class itself has a constructor and a destructor, a create and a start message loop, and all of these we already saw being used here in our main.cpp. There's the constructor, our create, our start message loop. Then it's private members that has a winproc as a message handler. Both of these will be using, they'll be working sort of hand in hand once we get the window up and running. We have a convert function here to convert some color codes, an initialize, a cleanup, and a destroy window. A function here called frame, which processes everything that's supposed to happen every frame per second. An update game function, which is called from frame, that updates the current state of the game based on the time that has passed. A pre-render and a post-render. A Windows receive focus and a lose focus. These are called if you gain or lose focus from the window, if for instance the user moves away from our window. We have a couple functions here that control the way we get the time in the game, as well as we can count the frames per second. And then we have a temporary function here. I called it display frames per second in title, but once we get our font engine up and running, we're going to remove this because we won't need it anymore. And then the private members, we have a pointer to the title, we have a pointer to a class name, we have a flag here to say whether our program is running or has stopped running, a flag here to determine whether our window is active or inactive, and then we have our game state. Game state is our own structured class, or it's a structure that we created ourselves, and I'm going to put it into the core in a minute, so you'll see what that is. Then we have a bunch of parameters here. These are mainly the parameters that we get passed in from the Windows parameter that gets passed into our constructor. So here you see, sorry, not the constructor, but the create. When we call create, we pass to it a pointer to Windows parameters. So what we're going to do is we're going to save that pointer in our member variable, but also we're going to extract the information and store it into the respective variables up here. We then have a bunch of members here that are used with time. So for instance, getting the times, saving the time, keeping track of the number of frames per second, things like that. And then at the bottom here we have a bunch of members which are associated with the window. So a handle to our window, a handle to the class that created our window, our instance, and so on. The other one down here is there's also a custom structure called color OpenGL, and I'll include it at the top of this .h file to see, so you can see what it contains. And then the last thing here is a pointer to our error handler. So let's go into our core and include this game at the bottom here. So our game state can be either started, menu, loading, play, pause, or stop. You can add other parameters here as you wish. But basically when we start the program in the constructor, it's going to define it as stop, meaning our game isn't running yet. But then once the game actually starts running, then we're going to set it to something like play. And it'll stay in play until, for instance, we lose focus, and we're going to go and pause it. So we can control where the game is using this game state parameter. The other thing that we need to define here is at the bottom we use color OpenGL. So we're going to define that structure at the top here. And what this structure does is it holds 3 values for red, green, and blue, and it has a custom function called set within it, so that we can set all 3 at once just by passing them in, or we can set them individually just by doing like the color.opengl dot fred to set the red value, fgreen to set the green value, and fblue to set the blue value. So you'll see how we use this in a minute, but what it does is it just holds the color, one certain color that will be used by OpenGL. Okay, so that's the general structure of our game class, and in the next video I'm going to show you, well, we're going to be going through each of these functions and starting to program them so you can see what they do.